There is a strange moment in every soul's journey when heaven grows silent, not because God has left, but because the final lesson has arrived. Many people celebrate too early, believing the battle is over when, in truth, the deepest examination has just begun. The enemy often attacks hardest after your breakthrough has been announced, hoping exhaustion will succeed where temptation failed. God has already declared that you passed the storm, survived the wilderness, and endured the waiting season. Yet one last test remains before the door fully opens. This final trial is not meant to destroy you, but to reveal whether your heart can carry the blessing without losing the one who gave it. In nearly every great story, when the hero believes the journey is complete, only to discover that the hardest hill still waits ahead. The soul, after surviving years of sorrow, disappointment, rejection, and silence, naturally begins to relax when signs of victory finally appear. Yet God, in His strange and perfect wisdom, often allows one final examination before the reward is placed into human hands. It is not because He delights in watching His children struggle, but because unfinished character cannot safely carry fulfilled destiny. Many people desire the crown, but few understand the weight that comes with wearing it. Heaven is not merely preparing blessings for you, heaven is preparing you for the blessing. This final test usually arrives disguised as something ordinary. It may appear as a delay when you expected immediate celebration. It may come through an offense you were tempted to answer with anger, a betrayal you wished to repay, or an opportunity that seemed easier than obedience. The tragedy is that many people fail not during the wilderness, but standing at the very edge of the promised land. They endure years of hardship only to lose patience in the final hour. It is a terrible thing to survive the storm and then sink the ship while standing near the shore. God often allows the last test because hidden weaknesses reveal themselves only when pressure begins to leave. A starving man speaks constantly about gratitude, but abundance reveals whether gratitude was truly rooted in his heart or merely borrowed from desperation. Anyone can pray passionately when they are desperate for rescue, but the deeper question is whether they will still seek God once the rescue finally comes. The final test exposes what suffering concealed. Pain can make even selfish people appear humble for a season, yet blessings uncover the true condition of the spirit. There is also something deeply mysterious about waiting. Human beings imagine that delay means abandonment, but heaven often uses delay as protection. A child may cry because the father refuses to hand him the keys to a car, never realizing that the refusal itself is love. In the same way, many prayers are delayed because the soul has not yet learned the wisdom necessary to survive answered prayer. God sees not only the blessing itself, but what the blessing will demand from your character years later. What feels cruel in one season may prove merciful in another. The enemy understands this principle very well, which is why temptation becomes fiercest near the moment of breakthrough. Satan rarely wastes energy attacking people who have already surrendered their purpose. The greatest warfare is reserved for those standing near the doorway of destiny. That is why exhaustion suddenly grows heavier, distractions become louder, and discouragement feels strangely unbearable right before change arrives. Hell hopes that if it cannot destroy your faith through suffering, it can corrupt your faith through impatience. One careless decision in the final moments can delay what God spent years preparing. Many people imagine that God measures greatness by visible achievements, but heaven often measures greatness by quiet obedience. The final test may involve nothing dramatic at all. It may simply ask whether you will remain honest when dishonesty seems profitable, whether you will forgive when bitterness feels justified, whether you will stay faithful when nobody is watching. The world celebrates public victories, but God studies private choices. Eternity is shaped more by hidden decisions than public applause. There is a painful beauty in realizing that God trusts certain souls with difficult endings because He intends to give them powerful beginnings. The last test is not proof that God has forgotten you. It is evidence that heaven considers you ready for something greater than your current understanding. Gold is always tested by fire before it is placed among treasures, because what is valuable must first prove it can endure heat without losing its nature. In the same way, God allows the final fire to reveal whether your heart still belongs to Him after everything you have endured, and this is where many souls become dangerously confused, because they expect God's approval to arrive through loud applause, visible success, or public recognition. Yet heaven often remains silent, while the most important parts of your character are being examined. God watches what you do when nobody applauds you because hidden moments reveal truths that public moments can easily disguise. A person can appear righteous before a crowd and still be corrupt in private. Human beings are experts at performing goodness when eyes are watching, but solitude exposes whether goodness truly lives inside the heart. There is something deeply revealing about the unseen life. The private room, the secret thought, the silent decision nobody celebrates, these become the true measurement of spiritual maturity. Many people imagine that destiny is built during grand opportunities, but most destinies are actually shaped during unnoticed choices that seem too small to matter. The world praises visible victories while heaven studies invisible discipline. God does not merely examine actions, he examines motive. Two people may perform the same good deed while carrying completely different hearts. One serves to be admired, while the other serves simply because love has transformed their nature. This is why loneliness becomes such an important part of spiritual growth. Solitude strips away the intoxicating influence of human praise and forces the soul to confront itself honestly. When nobody is clapping for you, when no audience celebrates your sacrifice, when obedience produces no immediate reward, the heart finally reveals its true condition. Some people only remain faithful because they are being watched. Others remain faithful because truth has become part of who they are. The first seeks approval, the second seeks God. The tragedy of human nature is that applause can become addictive. A soul that constantly feeds on recognition eventually forgets how to live without it. That is why many people begin their journey with pure intentions and slowly become prisoners of public opinion. They no longer ask whether God is pleased, they ask whether people are impressed. Yet human applause is one of the weakest foundations upon which a life can stand. Crowds are notoriously unstable. The voices that praise you today may condemn you tomorrow. If your identity depends upon applause, then criticism will destroy your peace. God, in his mercy, sometimes hides his children from recognition for long seasons precisely because he is protecting them from pride. Obscurity is not always punishment, often it is preparation. A tree whose roots are shallow cannot survive strong winds, no matter how beautiful its branches appear. In the same way, a soul that has not learned humility in secret places cannot safely endure public elevation. Heaven is far less interested in making you famous than in making you faithful. There are moments when obedience feels painfully invisible. You continue praying though answers seem delayed. You remain kind though others mistreat you. You refuse corruption though dishonesty appears more profitable. Nobody congratulates these choices. Nobody announces your integrity before crowds. Yet these hidden acts carry eternal significance because they are witnessed by God himself. The world sees greatness in platforms, titles, and achievements, but heaven often sees greatness in restraint, patience, and unseen sacrifice. Even temptation becomes stronger in hidden places. It is easy to appear disciplined when surrounded by accountability, but character reveals itself when opportunities for secret compromise appear. God watches how you treat people who cannot benefit your future. He watches whether bitterness grows inside you after betrayal. He watches how you speak when anger rises, and nobody would blame you for cruelty. These moments seem small to human eyes, but eternity weighs them heavily. C.S. Lewis once understood something many modern minds have forgotten. Every choice slowly transforms the soul into something heavenly or something hollow. No decision is ever truly insignificant because repeated choices shape what kind of creature you are becoming. A person does not suddenly become noble during one dramatic moment. Nobility is formed quietly through thousands of unseen acts of obedience. In the same way, corruption rarely arrives through one catastrophic fall. It usually begins with tiny compromises made in darkness, compromises nobody notices at first except God. That is why the hidden life matters so deeply. Before God entrusts greater influence, he studies how you handle smaller responsibilities in silence. Before heaven opens larger doors, it examines whether your heart remains loyal without rewards. Many people beg God for elevation while ignoring the ordinary disciplines that prepare them to survive it. Yet the soul is always being trained, even in moments that feel painfully unnoticed. Every unseen sacrifice, every private act of integrity, every quiet refusal to surrender to bitterness becomes part of the foundation God is building. Beneath your future, And this is precisely why the enemy becomes most dangerous when victory is near. Satan understands something that exhausted people often forget. A person standing at the edge of breakthrough is more vulnerable to discouragement than a person who never hoped at all. After years of struggle, the soul grows tired. Faith becomes heavy to carry. Patience begins to feel like punishment. And it is within this fragile moment that the enemy whispers his most destructive lies. He rarely tells you to abandon God completely. Instead, he urges you to make one careless decision, one impulsive reaction, one compromise born from exhaustion. The enemy wants you to fail at the edge of your victory because he cannot undo the growth God already produced through you. You are suffering. He watched you survive storms that should have broken you. He saw you continue praying when silence surrounded your life. He witnessed you endure rejection, betrayal, loneliness, and delay without fully surrendering your soul. By the time you reach the final stretch, heaven has already done deep work inside you. The enemy knows he cannot erase those years, so his strategy changes. Instead of attacking your beginning, he attacks your finishing. There is something tragic about human impatience. Many people can endure years of hardship and still lose everything because they lacked endurance for one final season. A farmer who abandons the field days before harvest loses the very reward his labor was preparing to produce. In the same way, countless souls walk away too early because the final waiting season feels unbearable. The enemy understands that discouragement grows strongest when blessings seem close enough to touch, yet still remain out of reach. That is why temptation often increases before breakthrough. Old habits suddenly return with unusual strength. Fear becomes louder. Anger feels harder to control. Distractions multiply. Opportunities for compromise appear almost reasonable. The enemy studies weakness carefully. He waits for moments when exhaustion clouds discernment and pain distorts perspective. A weary soul can mistake temporary relief for lasting peace. It can trade eternal reward for immediate comfort without realizing the terrible exchange being made. The wilderness itself was never Satan's greatest opportunity. The edge of the promised land is where many destinies collapse. Scripture repeatedly reveals this pattern. People survive slavery yet fail in freedom. They endure suffering yet become corrupted by success. Pain drove them toward God, but comfort slowly pulled them away. The enemy knows that a soul focused on survival often clings tightly to heaven, while a soul surrounded by blessings may slowly forget its dependence upon God. This is why spiritual warfare near victory feels unusually intense. The attacks are not random. Hell does not waste energy fighting battles it already won. Resistance increases because your progress threatens darkness. The enemy trembles at the possibility of a healed person becoming a source of healing for others. He fears what your testimony might awaken inside broken souls. He understands that. One person who survives suffering without losing faith becomes dangerous to hopelessness itself. Yet the enemy's greatest weapon is not always temptation. Often it is discouragement disguised as wisdom. He whispers that your prayers are pointless, that your waiting has been foolish, that nothing will ever change. He attempts to reinterpret your entire journey through the lens of disappointment. If he can convince you to surrender voluntarily, then he avoids the humiliation of watching God fulfill his promises in your life. Some people destroy their future not because they lacked ability, but because they allowed bitterness to poison them during the final stretch. Delayed answers turned into resentment. Unmet expectations became cynicism. Instead of arriving at victory with humility, they arrived carrying pride, anger, and distrust. The enemy understands that corrupted hearts cannot fully enjoy what God intended to bless them with. A bitter soul can stand inside answered prayer and still feel empty. This final battle often happens internally more than externally. The greatest danger is not always what surrounds you, but what slowly grows within you during long seasons of waiting. Despair, pride, impatience, envy, and resentment become subtle thieves of destiny. That is why guarding the heart matters so deeply near the moment of breakthrough. The enemy hopes exhaustion will cause you to speak recklessly, react impulsively, or abandon the discipline that carried you this far. But those who endure the final attack discover something extraordinary. The enemy's increased resistance was never proof that God abandoned them. It was evidence that the doorway was near. Darkness fights hardest when it realizes its time is running out. The very pressure designed to make you quit often becomes confirmation that heaven is closer than you think, and yet one of the hardest truths for the human heart to accept is that delayed answers are not always denials. Modern minds have been trained to worship speed, to believe that anything valuable must arrive instantly. Yet God rarely works according to the frantic pace of human expectation. Heaven moves with eternity in mind, while people think only in terms of immediate relief. What feels unbearably slow to us may actually be perfect timing from God's perspective. The delay itself often carries a purpose greater than the blessing, and we are asking for. A child standing in darkness believes the sunrise has forgotten him, though dawn is already moving toward the earth with absolute certainty. In the same way, many souls interpret silence as abandonment, when God is quietly arranging circumstances beyond their understanding. Human beings see fragments, God sees the entire structure of destiny at once. We cry over closed doors without realizing those doors were leading toward destruction. We resent waiting seasons, while heaven is using them to shape the very character necessary to survive the future we prayed for. There is something deeply painful about waiting because it exposes how little control we truly possess. People enjoy the illusion of power. They prefer plans, schedules, guarantees, and visible progress. Waiting destroys these illusions one by one. It forces the soul into surrender. And surrender is terrifying because it requires trust without complete understanding. Most people say they trust God, but waiting reveals whether that trust is genuine or merely convenient language spoken during easier seasons. Delayed answers often become hidden preparation because certain blessings would crush the person, and you currently are. Imagine placing a crown upon a mind still ruled by pride, or giving influence to a soul enslaved by insecurity. The blessing itself would become destructive. God is not merely concerned with giving you what you asked for, He is concerned with what that answered prayer will eventually do to your heart. Sometimes the greatest act of mercy is delay. Joseph dreamed of leadership long before he possessed the wisdom to carry it. David was anointed king while still wandering through caves and wilderness. Even nature itself obeys this mysterious law of preparation. A tree does not appear overnight. Roots must grow deep before branches can rise high. Yet human beings constantly beg for visible fruit while resisting the hidden process beneath the surface. We desire arrival without transformation. The difficulty is that preparation rarely feels glorious while it is happening. Most of the time it feels confusing, repetitive, lonely, and exhausting. God often develops souls in obscurity because hidden places remove distractions. There are lessons that can only be learned through silence. Patience cannot grow where everything arrives instantly. Endurance cannot exist where nothing must be endured. Faith itself becomes meaningless if sight replaces trust at every step. The enemy exploits these waiting seasons mercilessly. He whispers that delay means failure. He convinces people that God has overlooked them while blessing everyone else. Comparison becomes especially dangerous during these moments. You begin watching others receive what you prayed for, and bitterness quietly knocks at the door of the heart. Nothing tests faith quite like seeing someone else arrive where you hope to be. Yet comparison blinds people to the unique timing God has designed for their own journey. There are seasons when God intentionally withholds visible progress because He is teaching dependence rather than self-sufficiency. Human pride loves blessings that can be explained through personal effort alone. But there are some victories so impossible that when they finally arrive, only God receives the credit. Delay strips away arrogance. It teaches the soul that not everything can be forced through ambition or manipulated through strategy. C.S. Lewis understood that suffering and waiting often function like chisels in the hands of God. The process feels severe because He is shaping eternal things within temporary people. We often pray for comfort while God works toward holiness. We ask for quick rescue while He prepares lasting transformation. The soul resists this because temporary pain feels overwhelmingly important in the present moment. Yet years later, many people discover that the season they once begged to escape became the very season that saved them from becoming shallow, arrogant, or spiritually asleep. What appears delayed on earth may actually be perfectly on time in eternity. God sees dangers you cannot see, weaknesses you do not yet recognize, and future responsibilities you are not yet prepared to carry. The waiting season is not empty. Every unanswered prayer, every silent night, Every moment where nothing seems to move is quietly shaping something inside you. While you are asking God to change your circumstances, He may be using the circumstances to change you into someone capable of carrying the future without losing your soul, and perhaps this is why pride becomes such a terrifying danger to the human soul. Because it often enters quietly, wearing the disguise of strength, wisdom, or success. Pain is honest. Suffering usually drives people toward humility because brokenness reminds them of their dependence upon God. But pride is deceptive. It convinces a person that they no longer need guidance, correction, or surrender. Many destinies have survived seasons of suffering only to be destroyed during seasons of success. Pain rarely ruins people as completely as pride does. There is something strangely fragile about the human heart after victory arrives. During hardship, people pray constantly, seek wisdom carefully, and remain aware of their limitations. But once blessings appear, the temptation arises to believe they earned everything through their own power. Gratitude slowly turns into entitlement. Dependence transforms into self-sufficiency. And the soul that once knelt before God begins quietly building a throne for itself. Pride does not always appear as arrogance in the obvious sense. Sometimes it reveals itself through subtle attitudes hidden beneath respectable behavior. A person begins believing they are morally superior to others because of their discipline. They secretly enjoy being admired for their spirituality. They stop listening because they assume they already understand enough. Correct. Ion feels insulting instead of valuable. Humility disappears long before outward collapse becomes visible. This is why pride is more dangerous than pain. Pain usually announces itself openly. People recognize suffering immediately and cry out for help. Pride, however, blinds the soul to its own sickness. A proud person rarely realizes how far they have drifted because pride itself distorts self-awareness. The very condition destroying them also prevents them from seeing the destruction clearly. The enemy understands this weakness well. If he cannot tempt someone through obvious rebellion, he may tempt them through success itself. Some people would never abandon God during failure, yet they slowly drift away after achievement arrives. Comfort becomes spiritually numbing. Applause becomes addictive. Influence becomes intoxicating. And gradually the soul forgets the desperate dependence upon God that once sustained it through dark seasons. There is a reason Scripture repeatedly warns about remembering God after blessings arrive. Human beings have short memories when life becomes comfortable. In desperation, they pray for daily bread. In abundance, they begin assuming the bread will always appear automatically. Prosperity can quietly create the illusion that God is no longer necessary. And nothing destroys spiritual sensitivity faster than the illusion of self-sufficiency. Pride also changes how people treat others. A humble person remembers their own weakness and therefore extends mercy freely. A proud person forgets where they came from. They begin judging struggling people harshly because success has erased compassion from their perspective. Ironically, the very blessings meant to soften the heart can harden it if gratitude disappears. Success without humility often creates cruelty disguised as confidence. C.S. Lewis once described pride as the complete anti-God state of mind, because pride places the self at the center of existence. It resists surrender because surrender threatens its illusion of control. Pride does not merely want blessings from God, it wants the glory that belongs to God. And this desire quietly corrupts everything it touches. Even good deeds become poisoned when the true motive becomes admiration rather than love. What makes pride especially dangerous is that it can grow inside deeply religious people. Someone may speak about God company instantly while secretly worshipping their own image. They may perform spiritual acts publicly while their private heart craves recognition more than obedience. The Pharisees in Scripture were not condemned because they lacked religious activity. They were condemned because pride had infected the very core of their spirituality. God often allows difficult seasons to continue longer than expected because hardship protects some souls from becoming arrogant. There are people who would have destroyed themselves if success had arrived too early. Delayed elevation can actually be mercy. The wilderness teaches dependence in ways comfort never can. A person who remembers their weakness remains teachable, compassionate, and aware of their need for grace. The terrifying reality is that pride rarely destroys a destiny suddenly. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. Gratitude fades. Prayer becomes less sincere. The need for approval increases. Compassion weakens. Correction feels offensive. Eventually, the person who once depended entirely upon God begins trusting completely in themselves. Outward success may continue for a season, but inward decay has already begun, and a soul collapsing into Nali cannot remain standing forever, because pride always demands worship from the very person it is destroying, and this is why heaven pays such close attention to the smallest acts of obedience, because the little moments people ignore are often the very places where destiny is decided. Human beings naturally search for dramatic opportunities to prove themselves. They imagine greatness arriving through extraordinary acts, public victories, or life-changing moments that everyone can see. Yet God usually builds greatness through ordinary obedience repeated consistently over time. The doors people pray for are often unlocked by decisions that seem painfully small while they are happening. A single act of honesty when lying would be easier. A quiet prayer spoken during exhaustion. Choosing forgiveness when bitterness feels justified. Remaining faithful to God when nobody would notice compromise. These moments appear insignificant to the world, but heaven weighs them heavily. Eternity understands something human pride forgets. Character is not formed during one grand event. It is formed slowly through repeated choices that shape what kind of person you are becoming. Most people underestimate the power of small decisions because they only notice visible consequences. But every choice leaves a mark upon the soul itself. Obedience strengthens spiritual muscles the same way repeated labor strengthens the body. In the beginning, discipline feels uncomfortable and unnatural. Yet over time, faithful choices slowly transform into faithful character. The soul becomes shaped by what it repeatedly practices. This is why God often tests people with small responsibilities before entrusting them with larger ones. A person who cannot remain faithful in hidden places will struggle to remain faithful in visible ones. The issue is not size but trustworthiness. Heaven examines whether your integrity changes depending on the importance of the task. Many people dream of influencing thousands while neglecting the responsibilities already placed before them. Yet the ordinary moments are never truly ordinary because they reveal whether the heart can be trusted with more. There is something deeply humbling about realizing that destiny may turn upon seemingly minor choices. One conversation handled with grace instead of anger. One temptation resisted in private. One moment of courage. When fear demanded silence. History itself has often changed because somebody chose obedience in a moment that felt small at the time. Human beings search for spectacular callings while God quietly watches daily habits. The enemy understands this principle too, which is why he constantly whispers that small compromises do not matter. He encourages people to treat private sins casually because he knows corruption grows gradually. Very few souls collapse overnight. Destruction usually begins with tiny acts of disobedience repeated until darkness becomes normal. A careless word here, a hidden bitterness there, a compromise justified just this once. Over time, repeated compromise reshapes the heart itself. In the same way, small obedience creates strength people do not immediately recognize. Someone who consistently chooses truth becomes difficult to corrupt later. Someone who practices forgiveness develops resilience against bitterness. Someone faithful during lonely seasons becomes stable during successful ones. Tiny acts of obedience are like seeds buried beneath soil. For a long time, nothing visible appears to happen. Yet beneath the surface, roots are growing strong enough to support future weight. C.S. Lewis understood that every decision moves the soul either closer to God or further away, even when the movement feels almost invisible. Human beings often imagine morality as a collection of isolated actions, but in reality, choices shape identity. The person you become tomorrow is being formed by the habits you tolerate today. That is why obedience matters, even when rewards seem absent. You are not merely deciding what to do, you are deciding who you are becoming. Many people miss greater doors because they despise smaller assignments. They pray for influence while ignoring opportunities to serve quietly. They seek purpose while resisting discipline. Yet God often hides preparation inside ordinary responsibilities. Moses spent years tending sheep before leading a nation. David learned faithfulness protecting sheep long before he wore a crown. Heaven rarely rushes the process because rushed foundations cannot support lasting callings. There are moments when obedience feels painfully unrewarded. Nobody applauds your discipline. Nobody notices your sacrifice. The world celebrates visible achievement far more than quiet integrity, yet unseen obedience. E carries eternal weight precisely because it is offered without guaranteed recognition. God sees every hidden act of faithfulness, every private surrender, every moment where you chose righteousness over convenience. And slowly, through thousands of these unseen moments, doors begin to open that human effort alone could never force open. Not because obedience earns God's love, but because obedience aligns the soul with the wisdom necessary to carry what God desires to give. The greater doors are rarely unlocked by talent alone. They open for hearts that learned faithfulness long before the blessing arrived, and in the end, the souls who remain faithful through the final test discover something the world rarely understands. God's greatest blessings are not temporary pleasures but lasting transformations. Many people chase miracles while remaining unprepared for the responsibilities attached to them. They desire open doors, restored relationships, financial increase, influence, peace, and victory. Yet they fail to realize that lasting blessings require lasting character. God is not interested in giving gifts that destroy the person receiving them. That is why faithfulness matters so deeply. There is a profound difference between receiving something quickly and receiving something permanently. Some blessings arrive suddenly and disappear just as fast because the soul was never prepared to sustain them. But the person who remains faithful through hardship, delay, temptation, silence, and testing develops an inner strength capable of protecting what heaven places into their hands. Endurance changes people. Suffering refines them. Waiting deepens them. The final test is not merely about proving loyalty to God, it is about becoming someone mature enough to carry the future without collapsing beneath its weight. Faithfulness is beautiful because it continues even when rewards are delayed. Anyone can remain hopeful for a short season, but enduring faith reveals a soul rooted in something deeper than circumstances. The faithful person continues obeying even when emotions fluctuate. They continue praying when heaven feels silent. They continue choosing righteousness when compromise appears easier. This quiet perseverance becomes precious in the sight of God because it reflects trust rather than convenience. The world often misunderstands faithfulness because modern culture celebrates speed, excitement, and visible achievement. Quiet endurance appears weak compared to dramatic success, yet heaven measures differently. God sees extraordinary value in the person who continues walking faithfully through ordinary days, painful seasons, and unseen struggles. Some of the greatest spiritual victories happen in silence, far away from applause or recognition. There is also a mystery hidden inside prolonged testing. It teaches the soul to desire God more than the blessing itself. In the beginning, many people seek God primarily because they need something from Him. They pray for rescue, healing, breakthrough, provision, or direction. But over time, if the soul continues pursuing God faithfully, something changes. The relationship deepens beyond desperation. God Himself becomes the treasure. This transformation matters because blessings without intimacy with God eventually leave the heart empty. The enemy fears faithful people because they become difficult to control through circumstances. Temporary setbacks no longer destroy them. Delays no longer define them. Criticism no longer rules them. Their stability comes from something eternal rather than eternal. A faithful soul develops spiritual endurance that cannot easily be shaken by changing seasons. That kind of person becomes dangerous to darkness because they carry peace into chaos and hope into hopeless places. Lasting blessings are often quieter than people expect. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not sudden wealth or public success, but inner freedom, a healed heart, a peaceful mind, the ability to forgive without bitterness, wisdom that remains steady during uncertainty, love that survives betrayal. These blessings cannot be stolen easily because they are rooted deep within the soul itself. External success may come and go, but inward transformation carries eternal value. C.S. Lewis understood that heaven's ultimate goal was never merely to improve human comfort, but to reshape human nature. God desires sons and daughters whose hearts reflect His own character. The tests, delays, disappointments, and refining fires are all part of this mysterious process. The faithful soul slowly becomes softer toward God, stronger against temptation, wiser through suffering, and humbler through grace. And when the final test is finally passed, many people discover that the reward is greater than they originally imagined. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because they have become different. The fearful person becomes courageous. The bitter person becomes compassionate. The impatient person becomes wise. The weak person becomes enduring. God often answers prayers in deeper ways than expected because he transforms the person while preparing the blessing. Those who remain faithful until the end receive something the world cannot fully understand. Blessings that do not vanish with changing seasons. Peace that survives hardship. Purpose that outlives disappointment. Joy untouched by temporary circumstances. A relationship with God strengthened by every battle that once threatened to destroy it. And after everything they endured, they finally realized the final test was never meant to break them at all. It was preparing them to receive blessings strong enough to last without losing the soul that waited for them in faith.